The USS Constellation pitched violently in 20-foot swells, her flight deck slick with Pacific spray. Commander Claire Storm Dawson gripped the carrier's bridge railing, watching her F/A-18 Super Hornets secure for the night. She'd earned her call sign through skill and courage, leading the Navy's elite squadron through countless missions. But in 12 hours, one decision would strip everything away. Sometimes doing what's right costs everything you've worked for. This is her story. Before we dive into Commander Dawson's incredible journey, I'd love to know where my fellow Americans are tuning in from tonight. Drop your state or city in the comments below. Let's see how far our military stories reach across this great nation. The morning briefing room buzzed with nervous energy. 24 pilots filled the metal chairs, their flight suits crisp and ready. Claire Dawson stood at the front, her hands steady as she pointed to the tactical display. "Weather's getting ugly out there," she said, watching the satellite images scroll past. Winds gusting to 40 knots. Visibility dropping fast. Lieutenant Martinez raised her hand. "Ma'am, are we still flying tonight?" "That's up to the Admiral." Claire switched off the display. "But if we do, we stick to standard formation. No heroics. No showing off. We bring everyone home." The pilots nodded. They'd heard this speech before. Claire meant every word. Her radio crackled. "Storm, report to flag bridge immediately." Claire grabbed her helmet and headed topside. The carrier's deck crew moved like ants around the Super Hornets, securing tie-downs and checking fuel lines. Salt spray whipped across the flight deck as the ship rolled through heavy swells. Admiral Morrison waited in his command center, studying weather reports. His gray hair was perfectly combed despite the rough seas. Charts covered every surface. "Commander Dawson," he said without looking up. "How are your pilots?" "Ready for anything, sir." "Good. We're running exercise Thunderstrike tonight. Full squadron night formation. Low level. Radio silence." Claire studied the flight plan he handed her. Her stomach dropped. "Sir, with respect, these conditions aren't safe for night formation flying. The enemy won't wait for perfect weather, Commander." "No sir, but we don't need to lose pilots in training." Morrison finally looked at her. His eyes were cold. "Are you questioning my judgment?" Claire felt the weight of 20 years in the Navy. Every instinct screamed danger. "Sir, I'm expressing concern for my pilot's safety." "Your concerns are noted. Briefing starts at 1900 hours. Back in the ready room, Claire called her squadron leaders together. Lieutenant Commander Jackson had flown with her for 3 years. Chief Petty Officer Williams knew every bolt on these aircraft. "What's the word, Skipper?" Jackson asked. Claire spread the flight plan across the table. "Night formation. Low level. Radio silence. In this weather." Williams whistled low. "That's suicide." "No," Claire said. "That's orders." She looked at her pilots' faces. These weren't just names on a roster. Martinez had a baby girl back home. Thompson was getting married next month. Rodriguez was supporting his elderly parents. "We train the way we fight," Claire continued. "But we don't die in training if we can help it." The briefing room filled again at 7 o'clock. Admiral Morrison took the podium. Weather reports showed conditions worsening. The storm front was moving faster than predicted. "Gentlemen and ladies," Morrison began. "Tonight we test our readiness. 12 aircraft. Formation flying. Radio silence maintained throughout." Claire watched her pilots' faces tighten. They knew the risks. "Weather conditions will simulate combat stress," Morrison continued. "Any questions?" Claire stood up. "Sir, request permission to modify the flight plan." The room went quiet. Morrison's face darkened. "Commander? Weather's deteriorating rapidly. Recommend postponing 24 hours. The exercise proceeds as planned." Claire felt every eye in the room on her. Her mouth went dry, but she pressed on. "Sir, I cannot in good conscience risk my pilots' lives unnecessarily." Morrison stepped down from the podium. His voice carried across the silent room. "Commander Dawson, you will execute this mission as ordered." "No, sir." The words left her mouth before she could stop them. "I will not." Gasps echoed through the briefing room. Marines stepped forward from the back corners. Morrison's face turned red. "Stand down, Commander." "Admiral, these conditions will kill someone tonight." "I won't have that on my conscience." "Security, escort Commander Dawson to my quarters." As the Marines approached, Claire looked at her pilots one last time. Martinez's eyes were wide with shock. Jackson shook his head slowly. But she saw something else in their faces. Respect. Morrison turned back to the remaining officers. "Lieutenant Commander Jackson will lead tonight's mission." Claire walked between the Marines, her career crashing around her like the waves against the carrier's hull. But as they reached the hatchway, she heard Jackson's voice behind her. "Admiral, I concur with Commander Dawson's assessment. These conditions are too dangerous." Then Williams spoke up. "So do I, sir." One by one, her entire squadron stood and voiced their agreement. Morrison's voice boomed across the briefing room. "The exercise is postponed. All officers remain for disciplinary review." The hatch closed behind Claire with a metallic clang that sounded like a cell door. The court-martial hearing room felt smaller than Claire expected. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. 3 senior officers sat behind a wooden table, their uniforms sharp and their faces unreadable. Captain Sullivan, the presiding officer, shuffled through paperwork without looking up. Claire sat straight in her chair. The charges read like a betrayal of everything she'd fought for: insubordination, failure to obey direct orders, conduct unbecoming an officer. "Commander Dawson," Captain Sullivan finally spoke. "How do you plead?" "Not guilty, sir." Admiral Morrison testified first. His voice carried authority even in this sterile room. "Commander Dawson willfully disobeyed direct orders. She undermined military discipline in front of junior officers. Such behavior cannot be tolerated." Claire's lawyer, Lieutenant Colonel Barnes, cross-examined. "Admiral, what were the weather conditions that night?" "Challenging but manageable. The meteorology report shows 45-knot winds with 0 visibility." "Would you call that manageable?" Morrison's jaw tightened. Weather is always a factor in naval aviation. Then Lieutenant Martinez took the stand. Her voice shook at first, but grew stronger as she spoke. "Commander Dawson saved our lives that night. The weather was terrible. Worse than anything I'd seen. If we'd flown that mission, people would have died. But you didn't fly the mission," the prosecutor pointed out. "So how can you know?" "Because 2 nights later, when conditions improved, we ran a modified version. Even then, Lieutenant Thompson had to make an emergency landing. His engine failed from salt water ingestion." One by one, Claire's pilots testified. Jackson spoke about her years of flawless leadership. Williams described her technical expertise. Rodriguez talked about how she'd mentored young aviators. But the 3 judges looked unmoved. Claire could read their faces. The decision was already made. Captain Sullivan called for closing arguments. The prosecutor stood first. "Military discipline is not optional. When officers pick and choose which orders to follow, the entire command structure fails. Commander Dawson may have had good intentions, but good intentions don't excuse insubordination." Lieutenant Colonel Barnes stood slowly. "Gentlemen, we're not here to judge intentions. We're here to determine if Commander Dawson acted reasonably under the circumstances." Every pilot in her squadron confirmed the danger. Even the Admiral's own meteorologist recommended postponing the exercise. Claire listened to her career being dissected. 20 years of service reduced to 1 moment of defiance. The judges deliberated for 2 hours. When they returned, Captain Sullivan's expression told her everything. "Commander Dawson, please rise." She stood, feeling the weight of her uniform one last time as she wore it with honor. This court finds you guilty on all charges. However, considering your exemplary service record and the testimony of your subordinates, we recommend leniency. Leniency. The word tasted bitter. You are hereby stripped of your squadron command and your call sign Storm. You will be reassigned to training duties stateside. This court is adjourned. The gavel struck like thunder. 6 months later, Claire stood in a different kind of briefing room at Pensacola Naval Air Station. Student pilots filled plastic chairs, their faces eager and unmarked by real combat. She clicked through PowerPoint slides about basic flight safety. Weather minimums exist for a reason, she told them. Never compromise safety for mission completion. A young ensign raised his hand. Ma'am, what if you receive direct orders to fly? Claire paused. The question hung in the air like smoke. Follow your training. Trust your instincts. Sometimes the hardest decision is the right one. After class, she walked past the flight line. T-45 trainers taxied for takeoff. Their engines whine like toys compared to the Super Hornets she used to fly. Student pilots practiced carrier landings on a painted outline. Their approaches looked clumsy and uncertain. Commander Dawson? She turned to find Lieutenant Martinez approaching. The young pilot had requested transfer to Pensacola after Claire's reassignment. Sarah, what brings you here? I wanted to thank you again, ma'am. For what? Destroying my career? Martinez shook her head. For teaching me that leadership means protecting your people, even when it costs you everything. They walked together toward the base exchange. Claire had gained weight since leaving the carrier. Her flight suits hung loose in the closet. She flew a desk now, pushing paper instead of pulling GS. The squadron misses you, Martinez said. New skipper's okay, but he's not you. He'll learn. Will you ever get back out there? Claire watched a formation of student pilots overhead. Their flying looked sloppy, undisciplined. But they'd learn too. Or they'd wash out. I don't know, she said honestly. That evening, Claire sat in her base quarters watching the news. The anchor's voice filled the empty room. Rising tensions in the South China Sea as Chinese naval forces conduct unprecedented exercises near disputed islands. Pentagon officials express growing concern over aggressive actions by Beijing's fleet. The camera showed Chinese destroyers cutting through blue water. Aircraft carriers launching fighters. Claire leaned forward, studying the tactical formations. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Jackson. Storm, you seeing this news? She typed back slowly. Yeah. Looks serious. Wish you were still with us. Claire stared at the message for a long time before responding. Take care of the kids. On screen, the situation report continued. Military analysts spoke in grave tones about naval buildups and strategic implications. Claire turned off the TV. But sleep wouldn't come easily tonight. The television in the officers' lounge blared breaking news at 7 in the morning. Claire sat with her coffee, watching Chinese warships surround a cluster of disputed islands. The reporter's voice carried urgency she hadn't heard since the early days of the Gulf War. Chinese naval forces have seized control of Scarborough Shoal and are advancing toward the Second Tama Shoal. Philippine vessels are retreating under threat of force. Lieutenant Martinez dropped into the chair beside her. This is really happening, isn't it? Claire studied the tactical display on screen. Those aren't just territorial grabs. They're establishing a defensive perimeter. For what? Something bigger. The news switched to Pentagon briefings. Defense Secretary Williams spoke from a podium, his words measured but grim. The United States stands by our treaty obligations. Any attack on Philippine forces will be considered an act of aggression. Claire's phone buzzed. Jackson again. Storm, Constellation's getting underway. Emergency deployment. Wish you were here. She stared at the message. Her old carrier was heading into harm's way without her. The pilots she'd trained were flying toward a potential shooting war. "Ma'am?" Martinez was watching her face. "You okay?" "Fine." Claire turned off her phone. "We've got classes to teach." But the morning briefing dragged. Student pilots asked questions about the news instead of focusing on instrument procedures. Claire found herself drawing tactical diagrams on the whiteboard, explaining naval aviation strategy instead of basic flight safety. "Ma'am," Ensign Peterson raised his hand. "Do you think there'll be a war?" Claire set down her marker. "I think there'll be consequences. The question is what kind." By afternoon, the situation had escalated. Chinese submarines were detected moving through international waters. Japan scrambled fighters. South Korea raised its alert status. Claire walked the flight line, watching student pilots practice touch-and-go landings. Their approaches looked shaky in the crosswinds. 6 months ago, she'd been leading the Navy's best pilots. Now she was babysitting rookies who couldn't hold a stable glide path. Her phone rang. Unknown number with a Washington area code. "Dawson." "Commander, this is Admiral Morrison." Claire stopped walking. Students continued their pattern work around her, but the sounds faded. "Admiral. I need you to listen carefully. Constellation is trapped in the middle of a typhoon in the Philippine Sea. We're looking at sustained winds over 90 knots. The ship's taking a beating." Claire closed her eyes. She could picture it. The massive carrier struggling through house-sized waves. Aircraft secured but still dangerous as the ship rolled. "Sir, what does this have to do with me? Half my air wing is down with food poisoning. Bad shellfish at their last port call. My CAG can't fly. 3 squadron commanders are bedridden. I've got green pilots and experienced aircraft, but no seasoned leadership." The wind picked up around Claire. A student pilot wobbled on final approach, correcting late for a crosswind. "I need my best pilot back, Commander." "I'm not your pilot anymore, Admiral. Remember?" A long pause. Claire could hear voices in the background, radio chatter, the controlled chaos of a carrier in crisis. "You're right. I stripped you of that. But right now, I don't have the luxury of pride. Neither do you. What are you asking? Get to Norfolk. There's a COD flight leaving in 4 hours. We'll have you aboard Constellation by tomorrow morning." Claire watched the student pilot touch down hard, bouncing twice before settling. The instructor's voice crackled over the radio, offering corrections. "As what? I don't have a squadron. I don't even have a call sign. You'll have both when you get here. The Chinese aren't waiting for our personnel problems to sort themselves out." A new voice came on the line. Familiar. "Jackson." "Storm, it's me. We need you out here. Really need you." "How bad is it?" "Bad. Chinese carrier groups are moving fast. Latest intel shows they're planning something big while we're stuck in this storm. When the weather clears, we'll be outnumbered 3-1. Claire felt something stir in her chest. The old familiar tension before a mission. What about the Admiral's orders from 6 months ago? Morrison came back on the line. "Consider those orders rescinded." "I was wrong, Commander. You saved lives that night. Now I need you to save more." She looked at her watch. Classes ended at 1500 hours. The COD flight would leave at 1800. "I need guarantees, Admiral." "Name them." "Full reinstatement. My pilots get to choose their missions. And I want Martinez transferred to my squadron immediately." "Done. Anything else?" Claire thought about the court-martial. The humiliation. The months of pushing paper while real pilots faced real threats. "I want my call sign back." "You never lost it, Storm. Not where it counts." The line went quiet except for the background noise of a carrier at war footing. Claire made her decision. "I'll be there." "Good. Storm?" "Yes, sir." Bring your A-game. We're going to need it. Claire hung up and walked toward the base headquarters. She had arrangements to make, classes to cancel, a career to resurrect. Martinez caught up with her at the administrative building. Ma'am, where are you going? To pack. For what? Claire looked at the young pilot who'd stood by her through everything. Who'd requested transfer just to keep learning from her. Who trusted her judgment even when the Navy didn't. We're going back to war, Sarah. You ready? Martinez grinned. I've been ready since the day you taught me what real leadership looks like. Good. Because we've got 3 hours to get to Norfolk and 12 hours to save the fleet. They walked into headquarters together. The duty officer looked up from his paperwork, surprised to see Commander Dawson moving with purpose for the first time in months. Outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon. The helicopter's rotors beat against 100-mile-per-hour winds as it approached the USS Constellation. Through the rain-streaked windows, Claire watched the carrier pitch and roll like a toy in a bathtub. Waves crashed over the bow, sending spray 3 stories high. Landing's gonna be rough, the crew chief shouted over the engine noise. Hold tight. Claire gripped her restraints. Beside her, Martinez looked green around the gills. The young pilot had never seen seas this violent. The helicopter dropped suddenly, then climbed as the carrier's deck fell away beneath them. The pilot's voice crackled through their headsets. Tower, this is Angel 7. Requesting immediate emergency recovery. Angel 7, deck is moving 40 feet vertical. Stand by for green deck. Claire counted the seconds. She'd made this approach hundreds of times, but never in a typhoon. The carrier disappeared behind walls of water, then emerged like a breaching whale. Green deck, green deck. Clear to land. The helicopter slammed down hard. Deck crews ran through knee-deep water, fighting wind that tried to blow them overboard. Chain tie-downs flew through the air like whips. Claire unbuckled and stepped into chaos. Salt spray hit her face like needles. The flight deck tilted 30 degrees as the ship rolled through a massive swell. Welcome back, Storm. She turned to find Jackson waiting by the island superstructure, his flight suit soaked through. Water ran from his helmet as he grinned. Hell of a way to come home, she yelled over the wind. Follow me. Admirals waiting. They made their way across the treacherous deck, grabbing safety lines as the ship pitched. Fighter aircraft strained against their tie-downs, creaking and groaning with each roll. One Super Hornet had broken loose and slid 10 feet before deck crews could secure it again. Inside the island, the noise dropped to a manageable roar. Water dripped from their gear as they climbed toward primary flight control. The ship's movement felt more pronounced inside, like riding an elevator that couldn't decide which floor to stop at. Admiral Morrison stood in pre-fly, studying weather displays and tactical screens. His uniform was dry, but his face showed the strain of 36 hours without sleep. Commander Dawson reporting for duty, sir. Morrison turned. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he extended his hand. Good to have you back, Storm. They shook hands as the carrier rolled through another massive wave. Charts scattered across the plotting table, held down by coffee mugs and tape dispensers. What's our situation? Claire asked. Morrison pointed to the tactical display. Red symbols marked Chinese naval forces advancing through the South China Sea. Blue symbols showed Allied positions, outnumbered and scattered. 3 Chinese carrier groups here, and here. His finger traced their movements. Estimated 200 aircraft. Latest intelligence suggests they're planning coordinated strikes on our bases in the Philippines. Claire studied the formations. When? Soon as this storm passes. Maybe 18 hours. Our assets? Constellation and Lincoln are the only carriers in range. Lincoln's battle group is 6 hours south, riding out their own weather. We're on our own until tomorrow night. Jackson leaned over the charts. Storm, we've got maybe 60 operational aircraft between both squadrons. Half our pilots are either sick or too inexperienced for this kind of fight. Claire looked at the numbers. 2-to-1 odds were bad enough. 3-to-1 against seasoned Chinese pilots meant disaster. Show me what we're working with. They descended to the ready room. Pilots filled the chairs, some looking eager, others nervous. Claire recognized most faces, but several were new. Kids who'd graduated flight school while she was pushing papers in Pensacola. Listen up, she called out. The room went quiet. I know some of you don't know me. 6 months ago, I was your CAG. Then I wasn't. Now I am again. Questions about that can wait. She moved to the tactical display. Right now, we face the largest naval engagement since World War II. The Chinese have better numbers. Newer aircraft. Home field advantage. A young ensign raised his hand. Ma'am, what do we have? Claire smiled. We have something they don't. We know how to fight outnumbered and win. She clicked to a map showing the storm system. This typhoon is moving northwest at 20 knots. In 16 hours, the WWII will pass over the Chinese fleet. That gives us a window. Lieutenant Commander Williams spoke up. What kind of window? Confused seas. Limited visibility. Disrupted radar coverage. Classic conditions for hit-and-run tactics. Martinez stood near the back, taking notes. Several pilots looked skeptical. Ma'am, another pilot said. Those conditions work both ways. We'll be just as blind as they are. No, we won't. Claire switched to a weather overlay. Because we're going to use the storm, not fight it. Low-level approaches through the rain bands. Surface skimming attacks from unexpected vectors. Make them react instead of act. She spent the next hour walking through her plan. Use the storm's trailing edge as concealment. Hit their logistics ships first, then their escort vessels. Force them to break formation while the seas were rough. It's not traditional tactics, she concluded. But traditional tactics get you killed when you're outnumbered 3-to-1. The briefing broke up with pilots heading to their staterooms for rest. Claire remained behind with Jackson and Martinez. Think it'll work? Jackson asked. It has to. Claire rolled up the charts. What's the morale situation? Better now that you're back. These kids heard stories about you. Some thought you were a myth. Martinez laughed. Wait until they see her fly. Claire walked to the porthole. Outside, the storm raged with undiminished fury. Lightning flashed through towering thunderheads. The sea looked angry, violent, alive. Sarah, how are you feeling about all this? Nervous. Excited. Ready. Good. Stay that way. Fear keeps you sharp. Overconfidence gets you killed. Jackson checked his watch. We should grab some sleep while we can. Flight ops start in 12 hours. Claire nodded. But as they headed for the hatch, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Red lights flashed in the corridors. General quarters, general quarters. All hands man your battle stations. This is not a drill. They rushed back to the tactical display. New symbols appeared on screen. Chinese submarines, closing fast from the north. Morrison's voice echoed over the ship's communication system. Air crews to ready stations. Prepare for immediate launch. We are now at war. Claire grabbed her helmet from the rack. After 6 months on the beach, she was going back to what she did best. Outside, the storm still raged, but now it felt like an old friend offering concealment. The real fight was about to begin. The catapult shot felt like getting hit by lightning. Claire's Super Hornet launched from Constellation's deck into walls of rain and wind. Her aircraft shuddered as it climbed through the storm's outer bands, water streaming off the canopy in sheets. Storm Leader airborne, she radioed. Flight of 12, form on me. Her pilots emerged from the gray chaos one by one. Martinez flew her wing position, steady and precise despite the turbulence. Jackson led the 2nd Division off her starboard side. Contact bearing 090, 30 miles, came the call from the carrier's radar controller. Multiple groups, estimated 40-plus aircraft. Claire switched her radar to search mode. The scope lit up with targets. Chinese fighters were launching from their carriers, forming up for what looked like a massive strike package. All call signs, this is Storm Leader. Execute Typhoon Protocol. Stay low, use the weather. She pushed her stick forward, diving toward the churning sea. The formation followed, 12 Navy fighters disappearing into the storm's embrace. At 200 feet above the waves, visibility dropped to near zero. Rain hammered the aircraft like bullets. Lightning flashed around them, close enough to feel the electricity in the air. Storm 2, I've lost visual, Martinez called over the radio. Stay on instruments. Trust your training. Claire flew by feel, reading the storm's moods through her aircraft's movements. Rising air currents meant towering thunderheads ahead. Sudden turbulence indicated wind shear. She'd learned to read weather like other pilots read maps. New contact, bearing 120. Single group, low and fast. Claire turned toward the threat. Through the rain, she caught glimpses of sleek aircraft skimming the wave tops. Chinese J-31 stealth fighters, nearly invisible on radar. Tally-ho! Bandits 12 o'clock low. Engaging. She pulled up into the cloud base, using the gray ceiling as camouflage. The Chinese pilots hadn't seen them yet. Their radar signatures were lost in the storm's electronic noise. Storm 3, take the northern group. Storm 5, come left 30 degrees. Her pilots acknowledged, spreading out through the storm clouds. Claire waited until the enemy formation passed beneath her, then rolled inverted in dove. The lead Chinese fighter never knew what hit him. Claire's missile tracked perfectly through the rain, finding its target in a brilliant flash of orange flame. Splash 1. But the other enemy pilots reacted fast. Missiles began flying in all directions. Claire pulled hard right, her aircraft groaning under the G-forces as she climbed back into the clouds. Brake right, brake right. Martinez's voice was tight with stress. A Chinese missile streaked past Claire's canopy, close enough to see the smoke trail. She rolled left, then right, using the storm's wind currents to throw off the enemy's targeting. Storm 4 is hit. Rodriguez's voice crackled over the radio. Engines on fire. I'm heading home. Claire watched one of her pilots limp away through the storm, trailing smoke and fuel vapor. That left 11 aircraft against impossible odds. Reform on me, she ordered. We're not done here. The Chinese fighters had scattered when the missiles started flying. Some climbed above the storm, others stayed low near the water. Claire counted at least 20 aircraft still in the fight. Storm Leader, this is Constellation. Chinese strike package inbound to your position. You need to intercept. Through breaks in the clouds, Claire spotted them. Bombers escorted by fighters, heading straight for the American carrier. If they got through, Constellation would be sitting on the ocean floor in 20 minutes. All call signs, priority targets are the bombers. Ignore the escorts unless they engage. She turned hard left, climbing through a towering thunderhead. Ice crystals formed on her canopy as the temperature dropped. Her engines struggled in the thin air, but she kept climbing. At 15,000 feet, she broke through the cloud tops into brilliant sunshine. The storm spread out below like a gray ocean. And there, silhouetted against the white clouds, were the Chinese bombers. Fox 3, she called, launching her long-range missile. The weapon guided perfectly, striking the lead bomber in its engine bay. The aircraft tumbled through the clouds, breaking apart as it fell. But the escorts were on her now. 2 J-31s climbed through the cloud deck, their missiles already in the air. Claire dove back into the storm, using the thick clouds as concealment. Rain immediately obscured her vision as she plunged through the gray layers. Behind her, the Chinese fighters followed. Storm 2, where are you? She called. 2 miles south, engaging bandits. Martinez was in trouble. Claire could hear the strain in her voice as she maneuvered against superior numbers. "I'm coming." Claire turned through a wall of rain and lightning, her radar picking up multiple contacts ahead. Martinez was fighting 3 Chinese pilots at once, her Super Hornet darting between cloud formations like a dolphin through waves. "Sarah, climb to Angels 12. I'll take them from below." "Can't climb. Engine's running rough." "I think I took a hit." Claire's heart sank. Martinez was flying damaged, outnumbered, and running low on fuel. The Chinese pilots were closing in for the kill. "All storm call signs, converge on Storm 2's position. Emergency." But her other pilots were scattered across 50 miles of storm, fighting their own battles. Help wouldn't arrive in time. Claire made her choice. She turned directly toward the 3 Chinese fighters, abandoning her mission to attack the bombers. Martinez had followed her into exile and back to war. She wouldn't abandon her now. "Storm 2, when I call break, dive for the deck." Claire climbed above the fight, then rolled inverted and dove straight down through the storm. Rain and wind buffeted her aircraft as she built up speed. The Chinese pilots were focused on Martinez, not watching their 6 o'clock. "Break now!" Martinez dove toward the ocean. Claire fired everything she had, missiles, cannon, flares to confuse their targeting. 1 Chinese fighter exploded immediately. The other 2 broke off their attack, turning to face this new threat. But Claire was already past them, her aircraft screaming through the storm at maximum speed. She pulled up hard, black spots dancing at the edges of her vision as G-forces tried to crush her into the seat. "Storm 2, status?" "I'm okay. Engines stabilized. Thanks for the save." Claire looked at her fuel gauge. Half empty and dropping fast. Around her, the storm was beginning to weaken. Through breaks in the clouds, she could see clear sky approaching from the west. "All storm call signs, the weather's clearing. Expect heavy resistance as visibility improves." Her radio crackled with acknowledgments from the surviving pilots. They'd lost 3 aircraft but stopped the bomber attack. The Chinese strike package was scattered and leaderless. But as the storm passed, Claire saw what they were really facing. Chinese carriers stretched across the horizon, their decks launching wave after wave of fighters. She counted at least 60 aircraft climbing toward them through the clearing skies. "Storm leader, this is Constellation. How copy?" Claire keyed her microphone, watching the massive enemy formation approaching through the breaking clouds. "This is Storm leader. We're about to be heavily outnumbered." Her fuel warning light flickered on. Behind her, Martinez's engine was smoking again. They were 50 miles from home with the largest air battle since World War II about to begin. The storm had passed. Now came the real fight. Claire's fuel gauge showed red as she lined up for final approach. Her Super Hornet felt sluggish, battle damage affecting the flight controls. Smoke trails from Martinez's engine painted gray lines across the clear evening sky. "Storm leader, Constellation Tower. You're cleared for emergency recovery. Deck is green." The carrier looked impossibly small from 3 miles out. Claire had made this approach thousands of times, but never with hydraulic fluid leaking and warning lights flashing across her instrument panel. "Storm 2, how's your bird holding up?" she called to Martinez. "Flying like a wounded duck, but she's flying." Behind them, the rest of the squadron formed up in ragged order. 9 aircraft remained from the 12 that had launched 6 hours earlier. They'd lost Rodriguez to engine failure, Thompson to a missile hit, and Watson had ejected over enemy territory after taking cannon fire. But the mission was complete. The Chinese fleet was withdrawing after losing 2 carriers and over 80 aircraft. The strategic island chain remained in Allied hands. Claire caught the 3-wire with a bone-jarring thud that sent pain shooting through her back. Her aircraft rolled to a stop as deck crews swarmed around it. She sat in the cockpit for a moment, hands shaking from exhaustion and adrenaline. Martinez trapped 2 wires behind her, her damaged Super Hornet trailing smoke as it rolled past the barrier. Flight deck crews were already running toward both aircraft with fire extinguishers and emergency equipment. Claire climbed down from her cockpit on unsteady legs. The flight deck felt solid and welcoming after hours of violent maneuvering through combat airspace. Salt spray from the bow wave misted her face as she pulled off her helmet. Storm. Jackson jogged across the deck, his flight suit stained with sweat and hydraulic fluid. Hell of a fight out there. How many did we lose? 3 aircraft. Watson's been picked up by search and rescue. He's banged up but alive. Claire nodded. 3 pilots coming home in different aircraft than they'd launched in. But all 3 coming home breathing. That was what mattered. Admiral Morrison approached across the busy flight deck. His uniform was wrinkled from 36 hours of continuous operations, but his expression showed something Claire hadn't seen in months. Respect. Commander Dawson. He stopped in front of her, studying her face. Outstanding work out there. Thank you, sir. Your tactical innovations turned the tide. Using the storm as cover, hitting their logistics ships first. Textbook asymmetric warfare. Claire looked past him to where deck crews were examining Martinez's damaged aircraft. The young pilot was talking animatedly with the maintenance chief, gesturing toward her engine compartment. Any word on the strategic situation? Claire asked. Chinese fleet is in full withdrawal. Their government is calling for immediate ceasefire negotiations. Seems they lost more than they bargained for. Jackson whistled low. We actually did it. Held them off until Lincoln could get in range. Couldn't have done it without the right leadership, Morrison said, his eyes fixed on Claire. I owe you an apology, Commander. Claire shook her head. You did what you thought was right, Admiral. So did I. Yes, but you were right. Leadership isn't about following orders blindly. It's about protecting your people while accomplishing the mission. Martinez walked over, her helmet tucked under her arm. Her face showed the exhaustion of combat, but her eyes were bright with accomplishment. Ma'am, maintenance says my bird took 14 hits. How the hell did we make it back? Good training. Better luck. Morrison cleared his throat. There's going to be a ceremony tomorrow. Navy Cross for exceptional heroism. Both of you. Claire looked surprised. Sir, I was just doing my job. No, you were doing leadership. There's a difference. Later that evening, Claire stood in the ready room addressing her pilots. They filled the chairs, some still in flight suits, others cleaned up for dinner. The faces showed the strain of combat, but also pride in what they'd accomplished. What we did today won't make the history books, she began. Nobody's going to write songs about the Battle of the Philippine Sea. But what we proved is that good training, solid tactics, and watching out for each other can overcome superior numbers. Ensign Peterson raised his hand. Ma'am, what happens now? Now we go home. We train the next group of pilots. We pass on what we learned. And we remember that sometimes the hardest decision is the right one. Martinez spoke up from the back. What about leadership? How do we know when to follow orders and when to challenge them? Claire thought about the question. About court-martials and stripped call signs. About Admiral Morrison's dangerous exercise and her decision to refuse. About today's choice to save Martinez instead of pursuing the bombers. You follow your training first. Your conscience second. And you never, ever abandon the people counting on you. The meeting broke up with pilots heading to their staterooms. Claire remained behind, studying the tactical charts from the day's mission. Red X's marked where they'd lost aircraft. Blue circles showed successful intercepts. Morrison entered the ready room, carrying 2 coffee cups. He handed one to Claire and sat down across from her. Regrets? He asked. About today? No. About 6 months ago? Claire sipped her coffee. It tasted like the same bitter brew they'd served when she was an ensign 20 years ago. I'd do it again, she said finally. Morrison nodded. Good. Because I'm recommending you for promotion. The Pacific Fleet needs more officers who think for themselves. What about discipline? Chain of command? Command is earned, not just given. You proved that today. Outside, the sun was setting over calm seas. The storm had passed completely, leaving behind clear skies and gentle swells. Claire could see other ships on the horizon, the Lincoln battle group arriving to relieve them. 3 weeks later, Claire stood in front of a new group of student pilots at Pensacola. But this time, she wore the silver eagles of a full captain on her collar. Her call sign Storm was painted on the podium where she taught. Leadership, she told the eager young faces, isn't about being popular. It's about being right when it counts. And sometimes that means standing alone. A young ensign raised her hand. Ma'am, what if standing alone costs you everything? Claire smiled, remembering her own question so many years ago. Then you find out what everything is really worth. If Commander Dawson's story of courage and redemption moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible military stories. What would you have done in Claire's position? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one and love hearing from fellow Americans who value honor over orders.